The topic in hand that Comrade Dennis has put forward is the election in India. There's a lot to be said for this. The first is that the Indian election is just an enormous enterprise. 970 million people, that's almost a billion people, will have the opportunity to vote. Voting rates are pretty high in India. This election shouldn't be in any way out of the ordinary. There'll be a lot of people going to the polls. The first issue on the table is the nature of electoral democracy, not only in India but around the world. There's always been a kind of liberal anxiety about money buying politics. There was a time before universal adult franchise where people were only allowed to vote if they had property, there were property constraints and so on. In a way, we don't, of course, have property constraints. You have universal adult franchise in most democratic countries, but there are enormous, influences of money. The entire process of electioneering is so expensive. India is one of the places, it's considered, one of the most expensive elections in the world. The last general election for the legislature cost 9.5 billion US dollars, most expensive election. This one will be even more expensive. The government tried to create various legal fictions, electoral bonds, and so on to disguise where the money is coming from. It's a very big problem in all elected or all democratic processes. The idea of transparency of money is a big issue, and it's a big issue in India. It's not clear where the money is coming from. The left parties, the only parties to really oppose this electoral bond scheme, took the scheme to the courts, and the Supreme Court in India ruled against it, said that this is not, in fact, constitutional. But that doesn't mean that the money is going to be any less used in this election. Already indicators show that it's very expensive to buy media, to have road shows. It's a very large country. The sense of popular participation, enthusiasm is generated through money, not through a kind of political will. So the very essence of democracy is surrendered in many cases. People get their political interface through television or through the internet, not through going to mass rallies and so on. That is changing, as in many more advanced countries, Australia being one of them, where it's social media, it's the television, it's various shows and so on that are the interface between people and the political class. You don't really have a deliberative, participatory democracies anymore. Money power, media power, these play a very significant role. India has since 2013 been governed by a coalition led by the far right Bharatiya Janata Party, a very much far right neo-fascistic type of organization. Um, this party rules with a pretty good sized majority. It won re-election in 2019, looks set to do very well this year, most likely will be re-elected. Mr. Narendra Modi will be the prime minister, most likely again, and yet anxious about the situation. They went and did a buyout of the one mainstream liberal media in the country. New Delhi Television was bought out with underhand means. Small left outlets like NewsClick, under immense political pressure, the founder is in jail, Probir Purkayastha. Despite the fact that the right-wing BJP coalition has all the money, has a lot of the media power, insecure, they continue to, have no tolerance for dissent at all. Now, it's important to know that, like many countries in the global south, India's economy has grown pretty quickly, 7% roughly, much faster than economies in the global north. This inequality, though, within the growth is great. In many ways, India is more unequal now than it has been in a very long time, in 50 years perhaps. This inequality, of course, is regional. It's territorially different. In areas of higher inequality, in fact, the right wing does much better than in areas of lower inequality, and that has to do with the fact when there's lower inequality, as in Kerala, um, there's also higher literacy rates and so on, more popular participation in politics, therefore less of the control of the hard right. That's, I think, very important. Modi has done something interesting, which is that he has followed a neoliberal policy, pushed an anti state agenda, privatization, and so on, but he has personalized welfare payments. So it's not like the right wing government has cut back personal payments, welfare payments, but rather than channel it through the state, as it were, they continue to have it go through the state, but they've personalized it as if Modi himself is giving things. So all the different schemes available, welfare schemes, are called Pradhan Mantri schemes or Prime Minister's schemes. Photographs of Modi, letter from Modi to people who have received things, as if Modi himself personalized as the benevolent one who gives welfare, not the state. So they continue a kind of neoliberalism, but it's centralized around Modi. It's important to know that although a lot of political analysts use the word populist to describe people like Mr. Modi, there's really not much populist here. He has been very much against the farmers' movement, very much divisive, pushing a Hindu right wing agenda, fundamentalist agenda, wanting to convert the Indian state from a secular state into a religious state. This is not really a good agenda to call populist. What you have instead is a kind of majoritarian nationalism, a narrow nationalism, and so on. Um, this is something quite harsh because it's harsh against a large number of people in India, different pockets of people, perhaps religious minorities, other social minorities, women, and so on, under immense pressure inside India. Now, so what do the other parties do? What's the prospects for the left? I think one important thing to recognize is that in the eastern part of the country and in the southern part, in that sort of reverse L, Mr. Modi's right wing party is not going to do very well. There are regional formations in Tamil Nadu, regional formation in Bengal, the communists in Kerala, and so on in Andhra and Telangana. In this southern and eastern section, the regional parties in the left will basically take the majority of the seats. Mr. Modi's party has a lock on northern India, particularly the state of Uttar Pradesh, which is, got 200 and some 40 million residents, very highly populous state. Northern India and Western India, Mr. Modi will do well. So that there's a kind of regional, aspect to this election. One of the reasons that Mr. Modi's party triumphs in the north and in the west is there are no, in fact, social democratic or regional forces of any caliber. The Congress party, which was the party that emerged out of the freedom movement, used to dominate in that area, but it has entirely collapsed as a consequence of being given over to neoliberalism. It's become a neoliberal party. It's really unable to capture the kind of attention that it used to among people. So the problem for us in a place like India is that in the north and in the west, social democratic political forces are just not available. And in the absence of social democratic political formations here, the left is pulled into that politics. For instance, arguing for more social welfare, arguing to defend rights, and so on, unable to really have the energy to do that and to drive a left agenda. But the left is weak in those areas, dragged into a social democratic politics. There is no effective social democratic challenge to the parties of the far right in that region. And that actually impacts the overall election scenario. Now, the left, as I said, on the one side, is disadvantaged by the lack of a social democratic force in the north and the west, but continues to have pockets of support in places like West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Maharashtra, and in Kerala. The prospects in the election are mild. The left will likely win a couple of seats in Tamil Nadu as a consequence of adjustments with the regional centrist force. In Kerala, where the left is in government, it will likely win about half the seats, maybe more than that, depending on the wave of the electorate. Doesn't seem very clear where it will go now. And if the left is lucky, they might win a seat in Bengal. It will be a very small delegation of the left going into the next Indian parliament. But the left still plays a role in society, a kind of rearguard role to be sure, but a role in trying to define the nature of the opposition to Mr. Modi's government. I mean, I would say a couple of things on the front of the left. One is it is imperative for the return of a kind of social democratic force in northern India. At one moment, this appeared to arise with the growth of the Aam Aadmi Party or the Ordinary Person's Party, but that had its own complications. Mr. Modi, seeing the threat of a force like that, has criminalized it, put the Chief Minister of Delhi, for instance, behind bars, threatened others, and so on. Some of them have defected to the BJP. So there's been a failure to actually resurrect a party of social democracy in the north of India, and Aam Aadmi could have been that. That would have been an immense project for helping the left tighten the left flank, spend more energy organizing people, and so on, and not be dragged into spending energy defending the social democratic rights of the people. In southern India, again in Kerala, the electorate is very, very intelligent, knows that despite the advantage that it faces with a left government, sending a left delegation to parliament, if it's not going to have an impact, they generally will vote for the Congress. Very intelligent voting, understand it quite well. On the other hand, it is imperative to have a left opposition strengthened in parliament. And I hope that the Kerala electorate sees that this year and sends a significant section to to Delhi this year. Making alliances in southern India and western India with social democratic forces is helpful to the left. And the prospects in the election may not be great, but it's an important influence that the left has on these forces in the time ahead and perhaps in the next parliament, where the left will again convene them into being in opposition with a backbone against the far right agenda of Mr. Modi. That's where we are with the elections. After the election, there'll be lots of discussion and debate about how things went, the future of India. India is an important country in not only Asia, but of course in the world. It's one of the largest economies, largest population, and so on. So it's important always to watch and see what's happening in India. And it's important for a country like Australia, which, for all practical purposes, is part of Asia. And it's important to see the relations between a country like India and China. It's imperative that we draw down the tensions between these two countries, as of course you are working to draw down the tensions between Australia and China. What we need in the world is more collaboration, less confrontation. And whatever government comes to India, whatever form of right wing government, it's very important to have a strong opposition that is going to temper the right wing ambitions and prevent an acceleration of tensions in Asia, in the Indian Ocean, in the South China Sea, and so on.